I'm now at a place where I see Democrats talking about men in general and young men in particular, and I think of them as like Ben Shapiro towards Muslims.
Every sitcom has a man rolling his eyes at his wife because she asks him to take on some childcare responsibility or clean the house or something. And now you're mad that women don't want to continue to be victims and are asserting themselves.
You are essentially implying that high school boys are a protected class, and I cannot, under any regard, see them in that way.
It's a man's world? No grace? You guys are still running every single thing you can. No grace.
And they're all miserable.
Ryan.
All miserable.
Oh, please.
You guys are at the hands of your own destruction.
The speech that you just gave could have been delivered by a anti-criminal justice reform person, verbatim.
No, it couldn't, Ryan.
Girls are not inflicting sexual violence onto young men
on boys.
Rates
so therefore we shouldn't address it?
Won't we think of the reactionaries' feelings?
Yes.
Get the content off the platform.
Right, that's not going to happen.
A lot of my peers do mock the idea of male loneliness.
I know they do.
At the end of the day,
I absolutely know they do. We hear it all the time.
Men are socialized from birth to hate women.
It's true, Ryan.
We're also miserable.
Exactly. That's the whole point. We have a common enemy here.
It is gender wars turned up to 11. Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Bad Faith Podcast that I'm especially excited about. If you have been on the internet this week, you might have noticed that there has been a active, energized conversation about this broad subject of sort of, is there a male loneliness epidemic? Are people being too hard on the men? Concomitantly, there is a discourse around women posting themselves having graduated from their PhD programs and the like, and the kind of vitriol they get from men underneath. It is gender wars turned up to 11. And I have two folks here with me today who have been sort of participants in this conversation online. I have Devi, who you may know as a endorser, a canvasser for Zohran Mamdani, who was deemed a hot girl for Zohran by the New York Post and subsequently had some notoriety after she was canvassing with Wallace Shawn and completely understandably, given her age as a recent high school student, identified him as an actor from Young Sheldon as opposed to some of his more notorious works. Welcome to the show, Ella.
It's great to be on here. I'm so glad that was my intro. Wallace Shawn, if I ever meet you.
Cute.
I will run away in shame.
You have no need to feel any shame at all. Like, it's a little ridiculous, some of the like millennial Gen Z wars that expect you to know about movies that came out 20 years before you were born. Right. But the important thing is that you have been the focus of a lot of really unfair right-wing vitriol and have weathered it with an incredible amount of grace. So I look forward to hearing more about you and why you weighed in on this particular debate. And back on the podcast after some kind of an extended hiatus. I haven't chatted with you in a while on here, Ryan. Ryan Grimm, you know him previously of The Intercept, currently of Drop Site News, also Breaking Point's co-host, and my first and former editor. Welcome back to Bad Faith Podcast.
Always a pleasure. Nice to see you.
All right, let's just set this up going through the nesting doll of tweets and how this controversy came about. So on November 16th, Brad Wilcox, who apparently is the author of a book called Get Married, Why Americans Must Defy the Elites, Forge Strong Families, and Save Civilization, tweeted out a new Pew Research poll that showed that girls are now less likely than boys to say they want to get married. Okay. The percent of 12th grade girls that say they want to get married has dropped over 20 points over the last 30 years, while the boys' interest in getting married has stayed about the same. Wilcox framed this trend as, quote, disastrous, because he says married women do better than unmarried women. They have more assets in midlife. They are less lonely, and they are twice as likely to be happy, according to a general social survey he cited from 2022. Now, in response, Jill Filipovich, who you might know as a sort of liberal columnist and kind of a frequent gadfly to the left, quoted Wilcox writing, quote, might be worth asking what it is about high school boys that girls don't find appealing. I have a feeling the list is long and informative. At this point, Ryan Grimm jumps in saying, to Jill, there's no place for this kind of bigotry in decent society. No decent person on the left would ever dream of saying something this hateful toward all girls, and it's not okay to say about boys. And at this point, Ella, who again is a recent high school graduate and closer to this than any of us involved so far, tweeted, I graduated high school 6 months ago and can confidently tell you that a third of high school boys at maximum see girls/women as people. And she followed up with a specific example of something that happened at her high school that we'll get into shortly. I want to start with you, Ella. What did you think when you saw how folks were reacting to the Jill Filipovich tweet, and what provoked you to want to get into the mix?
I think that when we talk about young women not finding young men appealing, we're talking about the massive rightward shift, actually, that we've been witnessing among young men, paired with the pre-existing dehumanization of women we already see throughout society, including within the left. And I often see critique or inquiry into the behavior of young men being characterized as bigotry, which kind of, to me, cheapens the word, especially when the word bigotry should be used to describe the appalling behavior that young men inflict onto young women on a daily basis. I, like you said, graduated high school 6 months ago, right at the peak of Andrew Tate's rise. I saw my peers be indoctrinated by Andrew Tate, Nick Fuentes. The language and the sexual violence that these young men think is okay is disturbing. And the sooner that the left and right accept that this is like a public health issue, the sooner that we can start to address it.
So that's interesting, because I have to confess that for me, the knowledge of Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes and their influence on younger people in particular is all very anthropological, something that I'm reading about third hand on the internet. Can you help us understand what it's like to have your peers in a sort of normalized way genuinely consuming this kind of content? I mean, how do you know? How are they expressing themselves? What's it like?
I mean, of course, from like outside of class discussions centered around feminism on gender studies, you can see this behavior manifest itself through casual conversations, locker room talk, the way young men treat their girlfriends, the way they talk about them behind their backs, the way that young men socialize with each other. It's not only something that is like very political and politically focused for these young men, it's also now social. They're being socialized to not see young women as people. They're being socialized to dehumanize them, to see them as arm candy, as hoes, as thoughts, as something to conquer, something to take control over. And it is really disturbing. I mean, I'll tell you, when Trump won in like 2025, he won in 2025, right? Hold
2024.
on. Nope.
Last year, last fall, but became president this year, yeah.
All right. Moving past that, when he won, I walked into my classroom, my first period class. The girls were crying, and the boys were just all making fun of us. And that's exactly the type of gender divide across party lines that makes young men so unappealing to young women.
So when you read Jill Filipovich's tweet, did you sort of read into it that she's talking about that sort of political gap between young men and young women, or boys and girls, when she says, might be worth asking what it is about high school boys that girls don't find appealing? I have a feeling that the list is long and informative. What did you think she meant by that?
I mean, I don't think that she meant men are smelly and gross, though. Like that, I think that really the only change that we've seen from the past 20 years to now is the right-wing socialization of young men, is the manosphere, the rise of the manosphere.
Okay, Ryan, you obviously had a very different reaction to Jill's tweet, and you characterized it as a bigotry. Talk to me about why that was.
And maybe it was like an overreaction just to like the four corners of the words that she said in that moment, but you have to understand the context of years in which it's been said. And maybe it's easier to understand. Like if you said something, if you saw Ben Shapiro say something similar about Muslims, you would not say, oh, he's just asking what structural social forces are at work that have produced the problems that he's identifying with Muslims in this post. You'd be like, no, he's being a bigot. If Matt Walsh was saying it about black people or about immigrants, you wouldn't be like, well, Matt Walsh just wants, us to look at just the social constructs of our race relations here in the United States so that we can improve them, find policy solutions, and then he really actually is, has the best interests of this group that he is maligning at heart. Nobody would think that. And so I'm now at a place where I see Democrats talking about men in general and young men in particular, and I think of them as like Ben Shapiro towards Muslims. Like that's where I am at this point. And if I'm feeling that, like a lot of people are feeling that, and it's a problem. I think everything Ella said is correct. That the right wing takeover of the manosphere, the right wing socialization of men, is causing huge problems for them and for their potential now, like unlikely partners, and they're going to be miserable too. Like I think it's all bad. But then the question is, what do you do about it? And to figure out what you do about it, you also have to look at what happened over the last decade or so. This didn't come out of nowhere. Partly it's a, engineered and organized campaign on the part of the right to organize men into these reactionary spaces and to take over spaces that were apolitical: sports, gambling, supplements, weightlifting, and politicize them to the right. Like so they effectively did that. But what did Democrats do to try to politicize them and pull them in their direction? Well, they had an entire political movement that you may be familiar with that was organized around all of us coming together and making the world a better place. And young men were a central part of the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2015 and 2016. And Democrats decided very explicitly, strategically, and deliberately to make the fact of young male support for Bernie Sanders a problem for Bernie Sanders. Called them Bernie Bros. There's a Tom Perez email where he is, the DNC chair. He goes to like Iowa, Nevada, New Hampshire. He tells the Hillary Clinton campaign, you have a problem. A lot of young people of all races and all genders are behind Bernie Sanders, but you can use that against him. So what you can do is Hillary Clinton, if she wins in Nevada, you can say, look, that's a very diverse state. Hillary Clinton won it. Therefore, Bernie Sanders supporters are a bunch of white boys who are angry, and they're Bernie Bros. And when they react angrily to that, you can say, see, told you, look how angry these toxic men are. And then in 2020, it's still an up for grabs situation. And Joe Rogan, even with Barry Weiss on his podcast, says he's going to vote for Bernie Sanders because of all the things that Sanders says he's going to do and the consistency that he's had. The reaction to Rogan saying that, I think, was a hinge moment in Democratic history. They, instead of saying, oh, wow, we can build now an actual working class coalition and drive Trump out of the White House and actually deliver on an agenda that works for everybody. They ruthlessly attacked Rogan to paint him as this like racist, transphobic, homophobic figure who no sane and decent person would ever engage with, even though all the other candidates were trying to get on his show at the time. And they negatively polarized him and his entire audience against Democrats. And so now Democrats are like, what happened to young men? Why don't they like us? So both things happened. There was a push and a pull. And I can't do anything about the pull. The right wing is going to do what the right wing is going to do. We can counter their ideas. We can argue with them. We can try to present and model like better behavior and model a life that will be more fulfilling, rooted around kind of community and dignity and justice. But that's all we can do. But on the Democratic side, what you can do is stop the reflexive bigotry towards men. It's not making fun of the idea that it's okay to like talk about half of the country in that way.
I really want to talk about that idea because I think you are essentially implying that high school boys are a protected class. And I cannot, under any regard, see them in that way because I and my peers have faced an intense amount of sexual harassment, sexual violence from this subgroup of people. And it's to imply that calling this group out, this group of young men out for their bigotry is in itself bigotry is a little reprehensible to me.
But why not call out the behavior? Like there is no other group in which you would call out a group for the behavior of some. Like we have okay, fine. You want to hate on them too? Good luck building a coalition.
But it's not. But we have built a coalition based on expressing, like calling out the behavior of white people, of men, based on their implicit bias, based on structural violence, and it has been successful. It's
In what way?
Yeah, well, Ren, I think Ella is right. I think that part of what caused me to bristle at the analogy to other forms of bigotry is that, one, when we deal with these kind of majoritarian groups in a country like America that's 75+% white, where we had these civil rights struggles, there very much is a understanding that we're talking about a structural issue as opposed to individual racism. And when we talk about anti-blackness and white supremacy and things like that, in those contexts, if someone pops up and says, well, not all white people, we understand that it's a sort of a derailing tactic. That, of course, it's not every single white person, but we're talking about a broad phenomenon here that all white people might not participate in, but all white people do benefit from. But for some reason, when we're talking about men and young boys, and in this particular instance, we're talking about the ways that they're victimizing young girls. There is a victim in the scenario that is completely absent from the conversation, which is young girls.
Women.
And young women.
That was so well said.
That suddenly we're doing this. It feels a little like a reverse racism argument. I mean, what do you say to that?
Yeah, I don't think talking about white people as a group is helpful in that way either. I think the construct of whiteness is useful to like deconstruct and think through. The construct of like white supremacy and the way that like the Irish became white, the Italians become white are some Hispanic elements of who've been here for a while. Are they becoming white? Like that's all interesting and worth unpacking. But to just blanketly talk about white people has not been useful or helpful at all. Like what has been the benefit to the political project or to an intellectual project to lump?
You know me. I mean, you were my editor. You know that I wrote a lot of pieces about how I think that Bernie's way of talking about this was frankly more effective. I don't think it's useful, especially for politicians in a political context, to be broadly saying, all these people are racist, Trump voters are racist, regardless of what I actually think is happening on an individual or systemic basis. Like, I understand the political point you're making, but I also want to root this in what actually happened on the internet. There was a study, a Pew Research study, that showed a trend line, right? Even within the context of that study, overwhelmingly, both young high school boys and high school girls still want to get married. Like, let's be so clear
Mhm.
about the statistic we're talking about. Both are still upwards of, 80% or 70% wanting to get married. But when we're talking about trends, there tends to be an expansive language. So the Brian Wilcox is lamenting girls don't want to get married. It's not all girls. The girls aren't saying, oh no, don't be mad at me. This is a prejudice because it's not all girls. But
Mhm.
girls are less likely to want to get married. Jill and some people are saying, well, Jill is saying there's probably some explanation for why girls, capital G girls don't want to get married, and has something to do with capital B boys. And now you're popping in like not all boys. Well, what about not all girls?
No, I'm
If we're
not saying,
doing
but
not all
no, 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 no.
everybody,
But I'm not saying not all boys.
okay, what are you saying?
So we all agree that huge numbers of boys are having like huge problems right now. The question is
Yeah.
how you come at it. If you come at it from these boys are awful and they're awful and they're and I can't countenance the idea of them being protected or coddled or thought about in like this kind of um doing a social analysis to figure that out. Like what's going you just want to point the finger at them and identify all of the awful things that they're doing and say, look, see, no wonder girls don't want to get married anymore. Yeah, okay, all that's true. But the other way of coming at it would be the way that we talk about girls, for instance. Boys and girls are both facing a mental health crisis right now. Girls are
Mm-hmm.
facing a more significant mental health crisis.
You wouldn't know it
So
from the newspapers.
yeah, it's just a different way of talking to and about the groups. You wouldn't. Nobody's saying nobody's blaming the girls for having a mental health crisis, right?
Well,
And
because
nobody's
the
doing a
girls
not all
aren't,
girls or any of that.
but Ryan,
What you
the
want to do is
girls
you want to
aren't
unpack
inflicting
where does it come from? What's
Girls are not inflicting sexual violence onto young men
on
in the same
boys.
rate that young men are
so therefore
inflicting
we shouldn't
sexual
so
violence on
therefore we
women.
shouldn't address it. So we shouldn't
No,
We
address
but
the
should
mental health
address it.
crisis.
no, I'm going to
Go
tell
ahead,
you
Ellen.
how to address it. I'm going to tell you how to address it as a teenager, as someone who's witnessed many of my peers fall down the pipeline. The way to address it is to nip it in the bud and to censor manosphere content on Meta, on X, on YouTube, and to just cut it from the source. Because really, it's actually not a mental health crisis at the core. It's an internet crisis. This content is going around, it's everywhere, it's on the For You page of every single man I know. And no matter if they're depressed, if they're lonely, or if they're not, if they're perfectly happy with their lives, they are going to see it. And we can teach them how to analyze this content, how to have that media literacy, how to stop and think before they agree with every point. But the real and more pressing issue is, why is it on the platform in the first place? Of course, because these far right grifters make money, but we need to stop it at the source and just get the content off the platforms.
But right,
Like,
that's
I
not going
think
to happen.
that's going to be a little controversial. I mean, censorship, generally speaking, I think is a little bit of it's going to be a difficult one, I think, for folks listening, just because once you go down that path, as we've seen in very recent history, the overwhelming thrust of the censorship campaigns, because of who owns these apps, is against the left. And I think there's going to be folks who listen to say, well, yeah, of course I find this content abhorrent, but is it really about the exposure to this content, or are people making content that is tapping into something else that's going on in society? So, for example, some folks are trying to wrestle with, why might younger women not want to get married? And why do we broadly see trends against marriage? I think there's another statistic that shows that by 2050, 45% of women will be single. It's the largest number in the first time. I obviously have this conversation a lot with my other unmarried friends about, the value of marriage in a world where the economy has shifted so that women aren't reliant on men for salaries, and increasingly are frustrated about the asymmetries of child rearing in a way that has discouraged many of my peers from even wanting to go down that road. So are we dealing with a sort of socioeconomic reality that leaves young boys and men feeling like They have less to offer in the quote unquote dating market. And therefore, they're these predators on the internet who are able to make them feel like, no, you have intrinsic worth as a man because men are better than women, misogyny. And that is a sort of compensation for their sort of socioeconomic status, which no longer validates a narrative that they have superiority or even just intrinsic value. And if that's the root of the problem, well, then I agree with you, Ryan. As the left, we should be providing solutions to that by acknowledging that and then working on public policy that enables people to support themselves and live happy, fulfilled lives, regardless of whether or not they can, make a bunch of bucks and attract a woman to their cave or what have you. And I see there's some like nodding in agreement. But to come back to the point of tension that I think keeps coming up in these conversations is that this is not a both sides issue. Women not wanting to be partnered with men seems to be a reaction to male behavior. Male loneliness, in many people's reading of it, and I want you to opine on this, Ryan, seems to be a reflection of men and boys not being socialized to be as good at forming relationship as women and girls are, as being empathic, as sharing their feelings as openly, as having intimacy, emotional intimacy, physical intimacy with our girlfriends because of homophobia. All of those kinds of things have led to male loneliness. Patriarchy itself has led to male loneliness. And then there's an irony that it is these misogynists who have been promoting the patriarchy that are creating the conditions that men are now saying that women are responsible for curing. And so I want to open it back up to you, Ryan. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think that's all good stuff. All I really want is for men and boys, and in particular in boys, like these are boys, children, to be treated like people who are subject to, these parasitical, brutal social forces, and deserve our understanding and our empathy. The fact that their misery expresses itself in this misogynistic hostility that does not excuse it. And anybody who engages in any type of violence or harassment should suffer consequences. That's not what we're saying here. What we need to say is where's it coming from, and how can we change it so this stops happening? And you're never going to get there if you don't treat them like people who are subjects to these forces. And if all you want to do is say that these are just awful creatures.
But come on now, Ryan. That's not what Jill said. And God, strike me down for having to defill Jill Filipovich for this entire episode.
It's what men and boys hear, like overwhelmingly from the Democrats.
Of course they do, but it's difficult. It's difficult as a young woman to, kind of hear that and take it seriously, because really, when you say treat young men and boys like people, what comes to mind is the fact that they don't treat us like people.
No, that's fair.
And
they need to, and somebody, the left needs to model that kind of behavior. It needs to model that we're all in this together.
And we're talking here about the feelings of young men and boys, and it just feels so.
But right,
so
that
tedious.
This is where you guys always lose me. Whenever anybody says the kinds of things I'm saying, it goes immediately to, oh, we're talking about the feelings of men and boys. And just saying that alone is supposed to be enough to kind of mock the idea, and we should all move on and talk about something serious, something that matters. The implication there is what doesn't matter are the feelings of men and boys. And it's not easy for men to say that. They're very fragile dudes, but they do have feelings, and they won't tell you that they're hurt. What they will do is they will turn into reactionaries, and lash out. So
won't we think of the reactionaries' feelings?
Yes.
But Ryan, I'm not even hearing young boy, looking at all the Twitter threads and all the back and forth, I'm not seeing young boys assert themselves. I'm not seeing young boys saying, gosh, I wish someone would be more sympathetic to my way of life. I'm seeing adult men kind of project a sense of like their understanding of how young boys are feeling. And I see young women like Ella saying, well, this is my experience with young boys. And I see older women like Jill and myself saying, yeah, this is kind of echoing our experiences as well, having been all of these ages at one point in life. And so I it's not that I don't think that if there were a young boy right now, and I looked around a little to see if I could see, like, I don't, I don't be having, 20-year-old male acquaintances like that these days. So, but it's not, if they were sitting here and they said, well, I started watching Andrew Tate because I feel this way. Of course, I think everyone here would have empathy for a human experience presenting themselves. But there does seem to be something a little backward that we are sitting here with Ella, who is like saying repeatedly, I was victimized by boys in high school 6 months ago in these ways. And there's a prioritization of male feelings.
Exactly.
A version of this is like I saw several versions of this tweet in response to this controversy where people said like, why was this statistic? Why was one gender liking marriage more than the other gender not a quote unquote crisis when it was women wanting marriage more than men? Why is it just a crisis now? There's another genre that says, look, for years, it has been a meme. It has been a trope of television that marriage sucks, women are a ball and chain, marriage is a punishment for a man. Every sitcom has some, a man rolling his eyes at his wife because she asks him to take on some childcare responsibility or clean the house or something. And now you're mad that women don't want to continue to be victims and are asserting themselves. How is this not akin to asking the victim of an assault or a victim of racism or a victim of all of the social asymmetries that we know to suddenly subordinate their own fight for equality and desire to escape victimhood and sublimate that to their attacker, the person who victimized them's emotional needs.
And as you know, I've spent a lot of my career covering criminal justice system and criminal justice reform.
Yeah.
The speech that you just gave could have been delivered by a, what would you call it? Anti-criminal justice reform person verbatim.
No, it couldn't, right?
You're asking the victims of crime to subjugate, to like subsume themselves to the broader. You're talking about these root causes of crime.
Yes, you can deal with root causes of crimes. I don't ask the rape victim.
You're talking about treating criminals like people, talking about the root causes of crime.
Yes, we can talk about all of that without asking the victim.
No. That is the number one argument that was always made.
No, I'm not asking a victim of crime to say their rapist shouldn't be punished. That's not the point of criminal justice reform. The point is not to say that there shouldn't be accountability.
That is the
it's
argument
to talk
that
about
was being made.
No, but Ryan, I don't even speak for you, Ella, but it feels like we're just skipping over the accountability step. I think that criminal justice reform is
accountability. But what does it look like?
What does it look like? At what point? How should young boys like the ones that Ella went to school with be held accountable?
There is no social accountability for these actions. There is zero social accountability.
Right.
And
that's what we need. We need role models that are showing what is acceptable and strong and good behavior, and that behavior outside of that.
So many role models,
but that's not accountability.
Behavior
Ryan.
outside of that is
that's not accountability. Still, there are so many young role models for young men. I mean, like, it's not a question of should there be more role models? It's a question of this is a social problem among young men where they can't hold each other accountable. Because it's just not that important to them to empathize with women. That's the real issue.
Ella, can you tell us about what happened? You tweeted out an anecdote of something that happened at your school, I think, to some folks a little bit older than you, wherein the boys at the school, if I understand it, were using their female classmates' email addresses to sign up for Pornhub accounts?
Yes. So the graduating class of 2020 at my school wrote a very heartfelt letter to my school administration detailing instances of sexual sexual harassment, sexual violence, racism, misogyny, homophobia. And in that letter was this instance that had happened where young men had signed up their female and queer classmates for Pornhub accounts using targeted usernames, and they signed them up using their school emails. So I can't speak on that, as that wasn't my
It
I
wasn't
did
your
not go to
class.
school with that cohort of people, but I can speak to the fact that if this happened when I was in high school 6 months ago, I would be deeply unsurprised. Many similar things happened. It it doesn't feel out of place for um, to happen in a high school, and you can kind of like see in the replies of that tweet the real dismissal of women's feelings, saying, oh, but this isn't sexual harassment, this is nothing, this is just name calling, anyone could have done this, I'd love to be called a sexy ginger bitch. And like, these are adult men referring to children, to, God forbid, that sexy ginger bitch was maybe 14, maybe a freshman in high school.
Yeah, and
And
to be clear, sexy ginger bitch is one of the nicer of these names. Ella, you're
oh
probably
yeah,
avoiding talking about some of the
I
others because
cannot
they're chock
say.
full of racial epithets, which none of us should be saying. I can say some of them. So dirty nigger bitch is one of them. Um, there's a Asian slurs, dirty Jew bitch is another one. Like big titty Latina. Like there's worse ones than the
Horrifying.
ones I just said. Okay,
And that's
so
not like, this isn't the worst thing that's like ever happened to anyone in high school. They're like,
sure.
this is just a
But
graphic
it's awful.
instance.
It's awful.
It is awful,
And
yes,
it's and
but
it's reflective of the dehumanizing attitude that
exactly.
these girls are experiencing from boys. So again, Ren, I would
Yeah,
ask you like,
it's a product. It's a product of the right-wing socialization of young men and boys. Like of this,
right.
what we've watched happen over the last 10 years. I want a different socialization of boys and men, and I just don't think you're gonna get there without
Right.
treating them
But
as a go ahead.
we can see a different socialization of young boys and men. We can see it with the Zohran Mamdani campaign, where
Mhm.
young boys and men canvassed for him in droves, voted for him in droves, autocrat numbers up in Bushwick. And Zohran Mamdani did not campaign on
Exactly.
let's cuddle young boys and
That's what I mean by modeling
prioritize.
better behavior. Yes.
Right. But at the end of the day, Zohran Mamdani did not campaign on a platform of let's, humanize sexual abusers.
And in fact, he did weigh in on this issue. He was on Liz Plank's Boy Problems podcast, and he said the following. He said, I think, first of all, it is absolutely not women's responsibility to resolve this crisis. I think that this is a crisis that's born out of more systemic forces. He went on to say that a lot of those systemic forces contributing to men's loneliness have to do with just this greater sense of alienation in today's world as things are becoming more and more expensive for people to afford and the connections between people are fraying. So I
Yeah,
think that
exactly.
is a good kind of socialist framework. I think I alluded to something similar early on. I think the key part there for me is him saying that women aren't responsible for the crisis.
Not at
And
all. Yeah.
when we saw women like Jill and Ella pipe up expressing their frustration with the existence of the crisis, it does look to me, Ryan, like they're then being criticized for just saying, hey, yeah, the crisis is real and it sucks and I'm experiencing it. And that somehow is framed as like part of the problem because they're doing bigotry that's going to like radicalize the men further, as though men are radicalized because women are mean to them, as opposed that women are quote unquote mean to them because men are abusing them.
It,
Right.
it will be harder to socialize men in a progressive direction if the Jills of the world are constantly making it feel to men like they are completely unwelcome, if there's no path for them out of this darkness. That's the point. It's not their responsibility, and go ahead and say whatever you want. I'm just saying, like, if you want to end this, if you want to fix this, if you want to change it, Like at least be open to the possibility of it, and don't mock the idea that boys and men's feelings like matter.
Ryan, are you
I'm going
coming
to
to
be
this
honest
as
with you,
well as
Ryan.
go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Ella.
Ryan, a lot of my female peers do mock the idea of male loneliness
I know they
because
do.
at the end of
I
the day,
absolutely know they do. We hear it all the time. We hear it from you all the time.
but you know what we hear more? Misogyny. So it's difficult to take the idea of male loneliness seriously when I know what's driving the misogyny epidemic isn't male loneliness, it's misogyny. It's the pre-existing hatred for women.
But pre-existing to what? Time immemorial? I mean, these are social
No.
constructs.
Men are socialized from birth to hate women.
It's true, Ryan.
Since
Like,
when? Since when, though? Like,
since always.
It's worse. Because it's worse.
The dawn of time.
It's so much worse today than
But
it was
what's
even
making
15
it worse?
years ago. And there has not been a change in humanity in like the
But there
fundamental
has
nature.
been. There has been. It's called
Not-
feminism,
not-
Ryan.
not in-
the change in humanity is that women are able to, they don't rely on men. This isn't Jane Austen, and I don't need a man who makes 400 a year.
Like 10, 15 years ago? Like, no, the charts are collapsing at a much higher rate than like women entering the workforce.
So what do you
15 years
attribute
ago,
it to?
Me Too had just been born. Like,
That's true
No,
too.
much less than that.
Well, I mean,
7 years ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to what do you attribute that Ryan? What do you think the rapid shift?
I think it's the
in
right
women's
wing.
attitudes is?
It's the right wing socialization. Like it's the conscious right wing culturalization.
And by that you mean it's the way
manosphere.
that women are young women are being treated so poorly.
Yeah,
Is making them.
The manosphere. All of the things that Ella pointed to, I think are a driving.
Right,
cause.
but I was asking what is driving women's disinterest in marriage, young women's girls' disinterest in marriage.
Oh,
and you say it's the manosphere, but I'm like, well, it's the women's disinterest. So what's driving them? It's not the manosphere per se. It's how they're being treated by men, right?
Right. Yeah.
Again, it's like the focus of this conversation is constantly on.
No. Yeah.
Women are the ones that are changing, not men. Men still want marriage.
Yeah.
And
I'm
boys,
like, right.
18.
I'm not disagreeing with the problems that exist, and they're getting worse. I'm just saying, if we want to actually solve this, we have to like be a little bit more compassionate about it.
Do you feel like you're coming to this also, Ryan, as a parent? I'm not sure what the gender distribution of your kids are, but I think you have at least one boy.
I have 3 girls and 1 boy. Yeah, I mean, not exactly. I'm not terribly. Most parents that I know are worried about their sons that they're going to start watching Andrew Tate and will wind up going that direction. Maybe I'm being naive. I'm not terribly worried myself about that, but I'm on guard for it.
How so? I mean, why aren't you why aren't you terribly worried about it? And how do you be on guard for something like that?
Well, we monitor like YouTube and that sort of thing. We try to model, compassion and community and dignity and loving and try to pay very close attention to watch out. He also has 3 older sisters, which I think is helpful.
Although that can be radicalized.
It can be,
radicalizing to people.
It can go both ways. No, I'm more concerned about it for my daughters, because I don't want them to live in a world where they are constantly victims of the expressions of this rage. So, like, yeah, it's dark, it's bad. Like I
just don't think that we would use that phrase in any other scenario.
What phrase?
The expressions of their rage.
We would in fact. It's only in this case that we don't understand behavior to be the product of social construction. It's only in this case.
No one's saying that, right?
Nobody is saying that.
The left understands.
When we say
the left understands social constructs everywhere else. It's never controversial. It's only controversial here.
Ryan, do you think Ella, let me just ask you directly, Ella, do you think that your classmates' behavior is a social construct or because they're inherently bad?
No, it's a social construct. Dear God, men are not sprung out of the womb
then
misogynistic. They are
behavior is a
socialized to believe
behavior,
that.
therefore, is a expression of the social construct. That's
Right,
101
but we
level
just
stuff.
Okay, so we
we
all
wouldn't use the
agree.
term rage to describe any other scenario because rage implies that there's some real legitimate reason, that real a reason that holds up.
Well, A, it doesn't necessarily imply that, and B, we would like the rage at economic inequality is like it's rage.
Well,
Like,
economic
and
inequality is bad and women are great.
and
Yeah,
sometimes, but
that's
sometimes the
part of it
rage is
too,
directed
Ryan.
in racist ways, and sometimes the rage is directed in productive ways.
I think this is part of the frustration too, that while I agree that it's a social construct, it is also true that everything that we've said about the economy being bad and jobs being bad, et cetera, women are experiencing too, right? And even
Hmm.
worse. But
Yes.
the manifestation of that is different for men versus women because of how we're socialized. I don't think it's some innate
Right.
intrinsic thing, although let me not go down that road. I don't think it's some innate intrinsic thing.
I mean, some of it's
But
innate and intrinsic, like the genders are different.
yeah, I don't like that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah,
I'm too weary for that conversation right now. But
I gotta run in a second anyway, but go ahead.
I know. Okay, so if you'll stay for just for a second, Ella, I'll wrap up with you. But I want to give you an opportunity, Ryan, just to respond to that last point. That like, do you sense any of the? Do you understand what we're saying when there does seem to be some like all this latitude and grace? It's not that latitude and grace shouldn't be extended, but it's the disproportionate focus of the sympathy and latitude and grace that's being extended toward young men versus
If
young women, because it feels like women are supposed to accept their lesser status. And it feels a little bit like, what did they say? When you're used to inequality, equality feels like oppression. It feels like one of those kinds of moments.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of perception, that we perceive it differently. I think, from one side, people think like, oh, the men and boys are just completely coddled all the time. On the other side, they think that they get no grace whatsoever, and are the only group that isn't allowed to be part of a social construct. And
No grace, Ryan. In a man's America, it's a man's world. No grace. You guys are still running every single thing. You get no grace.
and they're all miserable.
Ryan.
And they're all miserable.
Oh,
You
please.
guys are at the hands of your
So
own
are we.
destruction.
We're all so miserable.
Exactly.
We
That's
talk
the whole.
about it
That's
all
the whole
time.
point. We have a common enemy here.
Not me. I'm doing
Miserable
great.
with a woman
Point
president.
single women.
Yeah.
All right, Ryan, I'll let you go. Do you want to tell people where to find you on the internet, beyond, drop site,
No,
etc.?
definitely not. No, do not find me. Thank you.
Okay, Ryan, I appreciate the grace that you showed in being willing to show up for this conversation. And we'll have to have you back soon to talk about more substantive political matters.
Nothing more substantive than this. Anyway, thanks. Yeah, thanks so much.
All
Talk to you
right.
guys later.
Take care, Ryan.
Bye.
Ella, I want to keep you just for a second because I do have, between us girls, I have a lot of curiosity about these statistics, especially the broader trends that I see among my own peers in my age cohort who are single, where I think I'm really experiencing this as a sort of a realization that a lot of the sort of propaganda, a lot of the messaging that said that women should be afraid of non-partnership, that you're going to be an old hag, etc., does now, in retrospect, feel like propaganda when you look at statistics about how much more men benefit from marriage than women. And I know that's probably a lot to put on statistics about 18-year-olds who might not be conceptualizing it in that way. But I can't help but see this as a broader economic trend of what it means for women to feel independent, not necessarily like having kids is a necessary thing to make their lives better. And then therefore what they expect out of men in relationships, if it's not going to be financial support and it's not going to be children and co-parenting resources, then suddenly there's all this added emphasis put on your personality, how kind you are, how interesting you are, what other added value, for lack of a better word, you bring to somebody's life. And as you look at the statistic about marriage that started this whole conversation, I do wonder to what you attribute as a much younger person that trend. Is it simply that the men are just so right-wing in a way that maybe I'm not even experiencing in my generational cohort?
Oh, it's definitely that. It's definitely the misogyny. I also think that, Women are kind of getting a taste of independence, of course. Like, we have our own money, we have our own lives, our own careers. We seek fulfillment in other ways than men. You know, we don't have to center ourselves around men anymore in a way that maybe our mothers used to have to. I also think, you know, a big part of it, I think, for my generation is pregnancy.
Mm.
There's a list floating around on TikTok, the pregnancy list, and it's like 600 individual.
I've seen
Um,
that.
yes, it's 600 individual like side effects of pregnancy, and some of them are just horrifying, like your teeth falling out and your
Hmm.
uterus
Hmm.
falling out, and just everything falling out. And you know, like we used to talk about it all the time, like the girls among our grade, and you know, seeing that, and then that paired with anecdotes on Reddit and TikTok and Twitter of men during their wife's delivery just ordering pizza, playing on their Xbox, not being there, passing out and having to be hospitalized themselves. You know, it just demonstrates the real perceived lack of care that men have for women. And my generation's group of girls don't really want to subject themselves to that. They've seen how their fathers treat their mothers. They've seen like the behavior among their peers, their male peers, and they've made their decision and they're moving with it.
Yeah, I pulled a couple of these montages. Maybe we'll put one in here and post from Instagram of exactly the kind of videos you show.
Can't women be women anymore? Why do you need a bank account? Why do you need a job? Why do you need friends? Why don't you just find a good man who's gonna take care of you, shit out a bunch of babies for him, and take care of the house?
What about women that don't want kids?
Red flag.
Red flag?
Make all the girls that I bring home walk through this, because if they don't fit through this, then they probably shouldn't be coming home with me.
You tell me, why aren't people married?
I mean, honestly, it's the women.
I think fat women are freaking gross.
Here's the thing about women's rights. Personally, not a fan. I think we gave it a good run, but maybe we should just get it over with.
Everyone also noticed that girls these days have just gotten like way too comfortable. I went on a yacht the other week, and for some reason, like I know girls check their face in the morning and they make sure they don't have any pimples. Why did a girl pull up with a bigger mustache than I have?
Women are emotionally unregulated. Women need men to emotionally regulate them.
You think you have kids?
I'm not having kids.
What you mean you're not having kids?
I'm not having kids.
That's what you was born here to do.
Of, you know, men complaining more during during their wife's childbirth. Of, you know, I saw one the other day of a group of parents who took their kids out to ice cream, and they scrolled over to the men all sitting on Adirondack chairs enjoying their ice cream cones, and they panned over to all the moms with all of the kids, frazzled, unable to eat, doing all of the childcare responsibility, and they pan back over to the men, and one of the men is literally like practicing his golf swing. Yeah. And there's a lot of that on social media, and whether or not people think that's an accurate reflection of motherhood and being a wife, you know, it's obviously resonating with people's experiences. I wonder, my mother was very honest with me about childbirth and those kinds of things, at the same time that she quite obviously really loved being a mother, knew what it entailed, and wanted to do it. I think that some people, especially men, their parents aren't very honest with them about parenthood and motherhood, and that might be part of the asymmetry we're seeing as well. I have had the experience of asking men in relationships, you know what happens, right? And I'll read down some of the items on the pregnancy list, you know,
and they
episiotomies and you know, peeing when you sneeze for the rest of your life, and like poor pelvic floor control, you know, all the things.
And they had no idea. They had no idea.
Well, or they'll like wave it away. They'll either wave it away and be like, "Oh, that's not going to happen to you," and I'm like, "Well, it very well may." Or
and the maternal death rate for women of color is so much higher than it is for white women. So really,
Yes.
it could happen to us.
It very much could. Or if they don't wave it away, they'll say they'll characterize my raising these realities and saying, "Are you ready for this? Are you gonna, be there through this? Do you think you can be attracted to me through this? Will you be fulfilled through this?" As me articulating a lack of desire to have a kid, right? So me being honest with them about what it entails is like, "Oh, you must not want this," and I'm like, "I want it under certain conditions of you being a real partner, but what you're displaying to me is that you don't really want to be a parent. You want to just have kids."
You want, I've heard this saying that's like, men want a kid like they want a dog, like they want a puppy. Like, ooh, puppy. But
Yes. It's not going to change your life that much in their eyes. And so I do think there is for evolutionary reason, once you can not get pregnant, once birth control is in the picture, I do think because of the evolutionary cost of child having to women, there's an interesting dynamic emerging where the cost benefit, without the social pressures to have kids, the cost benefit is slowly militating against it for women. Right. And nothing has changed for men the cost benefit of it has always been just benefit, benefit, benefit. And that, to me, is one of the social realities that socialism can start to address. I went to Copenhagen last year, and I was like, why are there so many 26-year-old male au pairs? Why are all these young men in the streets with all these kids in the front of their bicycles, carting them around on the playgrounds in the middle of the day? And then I realized these are fathers.
Childcare.
These are fathers, and they have paternity leave, and they are taking care of their children.
Yes, it's so novel to us in the United States.
Yes. So I'm not saying that it's a phenomenon that couldn't change with social support, and maybe that we should encourage to change with social support. But again, I do have an issue with it being framed as a quote unquote problem, whereas the asymmetries that existed when women didn't have those choices weren't seen as a problem.
Right. Yeah. It's reminding me of the 4B movement in South Korea, where
What's that?
Women, I get to tell you. This is great. Where women in South Korea, fueled by the same rise in the right wing and the rise of misogyny in South Korea, have taken to committing to not take a partner and to not have a child, to live a life that isn't centered around men. And it's garnered a really strong reaction on social media, but I just think if you can be fulfilled without man and child, be fulfilled without man and child, As women, we're expected to be fulfilled with a man and child, but it's a new era.
Yeah, I do think I read the statistic at the top of the episode that by some accounts, women are less happy, et cetera, if they don't get married and they don't have kids, et cetera. But it is also true that women are more happy single than men are single. And I think that first stat is meant to obscure the second. So let's say hypothetically, everybody's happier if they get married and have kids, but the consequences of not doing so are worse for men than they are for women, which is contrary to the narrative we've been fed, which is that women are spinsters who, nobody wants, and men can marry younger and all those things. Maybe that's true, but there's some indication that men remarry quickly after they're widowed and seek younger partners because they have difficulty sort of maintaining themselves and their households and their social relationships absent a woman in their life. Whereas women are happier to stay single because we have friends and social relationships and know how to cultivate that. And I've seen that also. This isn't a man-beating session. I've had these conversations with my male friends who I care about, right?
Right, same.
Single or divorced or what have you, about how they do really want partnership again because they're lonely. They are lonely. And that's not something I'm mocking. I feel poorly for them because they're not, I'm going to stay at my friend's, my girlfriend's house. We're going on vacation together. We're sleeping in the same bed. Nobody cares. No one's going, pause. Isn't that what your generation says? Pause.
Oh, let me tell you.
Your version of no homo.
Yes, let me tell you. During my senior trip, which was 5 months ago, we had a friend group of 5 people for each hotel room, and it was boys groups and girls groups for each room, and us women were more than happy to like sleep next to each other in the same bed, but some of the men like slept on the floor, even in the bathtub, on the bathroom floor. It was just a real mess.
Like, it's hurting them. Like, patriarchy. We've been telling them for years that the patriarchy is hurting you. You're sleeping in the bathtub. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous.
Exactly.
Can I ask you? I'm so curious. I mean, I have spoken to like guys maybe in their late 20s about this more recently, but not anybody as young as you. You're so young to even be thinking about like long-term partnership in any way. But and I wasn't dating at your age. I didn't get a boyfriend until college. But I do wonder, are people dating? Are people in high school on like social media dating apps at that young?
No,
or
that's illegal. That's like actually
illegal.
Like
Okay.
you can't download Hinge if you're under 18. You
Okay,
have
that makes
to like
sense.
it's the whole thing.
Okay.
But as soon as I turned 18, I did download Hinge, and ooh, great anecdote here. I
Please.
downloaded Hinge, and a response to one of the prompts asking me why I downloaded the app, I wrote like, "Oh, I downloaded the app because Zohran Mamdani met his wife on here," and which was true. I did do that, and apparently it made its way back to his team, and he saw it. So sometimes, like, you know, I've had a real relationship with this campaign, like many highs, many lows.
Wait, was that before or after you made
Before.
Oh, interesting. Is that your first contact with the campaign before you had door knocked or anything like that?
I believe it was.
That's so funny. Well, they are very, very social media savvy. You got to give it to them. And I presume you live in New York. You're from New York.
Of course, yes.
People have been asking me for interviews and stuff. You know, what was the first time you became, aware of Zohran and the campaign and stuff? And I had interviewed Zohran years ago during his other activism on the show. But I start telling the story at the viral interviews that he did, man in the street interviews with folks who had voted for Trump in New York. And I wonder, as a person in a different generational cohort with a different sort of consumption of social media, what your experience of the campaign was like from your perspective.
Definitely one of the street videos that he did. I think it was the halal cart one. I can't be sure. And I think that was also my friend's first interaction with him as well, the halal cart video. I know that got a lot of reach. I did see it on Twitter, and I was like, okay, I love this guy. He's never going to win, but great. And then whoop-de-doo, here we are.
Yeah. Can I ask you, Ella, what is have you talked to your parents or older family members about all of this sort of gender war, male loneliness stuff? And do they have a perspective on how you should be thinking about or interacting with men as you're now out of high school and moving into adulthood?
Oh my God, this is a great one. Both my parents are immigrants. I do my very, very best to never talk to them about my dating life. I think my father thinks that dating men is a waste of time and that I should be focused on my studies. And in that way, he's really woke. He's so woke. Go dad.
Go dad, he's not wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you have female family members who've weighed in at all?
My mother, I think she also thinks dating men is a waste of time, but sometimes she will like interact with a man she thinks is attractive, who's usually like 10 years older than me, and she'll be like, you should go date him. And I'm like, well, Mom, that's not how things work. Like, that's like weirdly jailbait.
And are they aware of these attitudes that are sort of pervasive among young men, the misogyny and stuff?
I have no idea. I mean, honestly, I think my father might be somewhat, like, he definitely understands like the rise of the right wing. And my mother, I don't know. I know that she's aware of it. I don't know what her opinion on it is.
And do you have any brothers?
I think no. I'm an only child, actually.
Okay.
Great. I love it.
Okay.
A lot of my male friends do, like, they all see the issue. They see the issue of the manosphere, and they see the rise, and God forbid, they have friends who fell down the pipeline and who are now just spouting nonsense at them 24/7.
Yeah. So what is the dynamic between the men who succumbed and the men who didn't? Because when Ryan was here, we were obviously talking about it as though I don't want to mischaracterize what he said, but it did feel like we were being pushed into this idea that it is all men and that we're not aware that, that we don't have male friends who are good and lovely and who we care about and who aren't that way. But you just alluded to some that you have. And I wonder, like, to what do they attribute not falling down the rabbit hole? Or how do they interact with maybe other male friends of theirs who have? Are there friends across that sort of divide, or are there just basically camps of Andrew Tate guys and like regular guys?
They attribute them not falling down the divide to respect for women and media literacy. So I had an ex, hope he's well, who said that he had actually, and this was like during Andrew Tate's early rise, he said that he had seen some of his videos and that, Andrew had begun his video with attractive women are treated better in life. And that is like, and my ex was like, yeah, that's true, because it is true. Like,
sure, of course.
If you're an attractive woman, you are given preferential treatment than a woman who isn't attractive would receive. But then, like, that was like the hook, but then he started spouting misogynistic nonsense. And then my ex was like, oh, okay, well, that was not a smooth transition at all. And I think really, like, it does boil down to, like, this issue of media literacy, of, like, rising illiteracy rates in America, of, well, like, the kids can't think anymore.
Yeah, it does feel like that prompt even, attractive women get treated better. It feels like it's asking boys to say, well, there's something unfair. Someone's getting something for an intangible quality that I don't have, and their life is easier, and this is unfair. There's a sense of injustice. It's interesting not to ask the question, well, what about unattractive women? Like, what about everybody else? Like, is this really like us versus women? Or is it like attractive people, generally speaking, get treated better in life? That's not a gender issue. That's like beauty privilege.
Exactly.
And how is this getting flipped into I should therefore hate women? Because I could sit there and do a video that says, rich men get treated better in life. And then be like, we should hate. Really, I mean, you should hate rich men for different reasons.
Exactly.
LOL.
Different, like, let's tax the rich, yes, but different conversation. But really, attractive women get treated better in life is just a lazy analysis of Eurocentric beauty standards, of class, of gender, and
men. Like, who's treating them better? Like,
exactly.
I'm not treating them better. I'm a heterosexual woman. Yeah.
What's the issue here? There's a big issue.
This is the circularity of it. Yeah, this is and again, it's not that there's not a problem and that men aren't victimized by it, but it is really difficult to feel like this is, I mean, we're victimized by it too, right? Because I think many of us would love to have wonderful, loving male partners as heterosexual women, but like, I would like there to be more of them. I would like the inventory to be greater if they were socialized to be better. And it's not us saying we don't like want men. It's saying, oh, we are not willing to accept men at any cost. At any old man.
I'm not willing to settle for a misogynist. Exactly.
Right. And so it does feel
I can
weird
live on my own.
Right. And that's the part, I think that is I think why the right has tapped into this, because what they really want is to roll back rights, right? So the frustration is with this gets focused on feminism, because feminism is what has enabled women to live on their own. When women aren't able to live on their own, then they have more access to women regardless of how they behave. That's the whole game. Barefoot and pregnant is a trope for a reason. Once you have kids and you're financially reliant on someone and you need someone to, work so that you can do childcare because childcare is so expensive, all of this is a system to prevent men from having to have any accountability for their actions in the way that we were sort of pushing Ryan to engage with, like, what does accountability look like? What does that change look like? And how do you get accountability without there being consequences? And what it sort of feels like is that we're in the consequences phase, where men are there's like a little bit of this tantrum being thrown because they're like, oh no, I can't get women. And I'm not like, LOL, you can't get women. I'm not like mocking you for not being able to get women, but it's like, okay, now let's start the conversation about why. And it has to do with a lot of your own behaviors. And I don't approve of like the women driven content that is like, you know, I hate you and dehumanizing and all of that stuff. Like, that's not where I'm coming from at all. But in a world that is still run by men, controlled by men, like the media is run by men, politics is run by men, like you really are.
Like, who set the system up?
Responsible for all of the things. So I just don't understand why you, me, or Jill Filipovich, God bless her, are really the focus of any of this. Ella, I really appreciate your willingness to come and talk this out with me and to engage in real life with Ryan. When I see people I like getting into fisticuffs on the internet, I am always thrilled when they're willing to bring it into real life and sort of have a deeper, more substantive conversation and or squash the beef. So I appreciate your grace in all of this as well.
It's been great. Thank you so much for having me.
Do you want to tell the audience anything about where they can find you online, if they want to follow you, or any other work that you might be doing right now?
Yes, you can find me House of Devi on Twitter, Ella Devi on TikTok and Instagram, and more recently in the New York Post in a nice article titled "Hot Girl for Zohran." Yeah, that's.
I love when they low key try to insult you, because you never framed yourself as a hot girl for Zohran, right? They added the label to you.
Didn't. They did. They christened me.
As someone who trended as DEI Barbie for a couple of days on Twitter, I love when they low key compliment you.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's good.
As they're trying to drag you.
I want Bolshevik Barbie next.
I love it. I want that for you and me both. Thank you so much, Ella Devi, for joining us on this episode of Bad Faith Podcast. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. You know, you can get an extra episode of Bad Faith Podcast every Monday at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. Thanks for supporting. As always, take care of yourselves and remember to keep the faith. Hey, YouTube. Thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.